This video is about the GATT, General Agreement of Tariff and Trade. During the Great Depression in 1930, the international trade was badly affected and various countries imposed import restrictions for safeguarding their economies. It resulted in sharp decline in the world trade. In 1945, the United States put forward many proposals for extending international trade and employment. On October 30, in 1947, 23 countries at Geneva signed an agreement related to tariff imposed on trade. GATT. What does it stand for? It is a general agreement on tariff and trade. The GATT provides the global trade rules as well as a framework for trade disputes in 1948 to 1994. It was one of the Bretton Woods organization developed after the World War II. Well, it is a set of multilateral trade agreements aimed to the abolition of quotas and the reduction of tariff duties among the signing nations. The first round of the negotiation impacts 1/5 of world trade. There were 23 founding members, originally signed by 23 countries at Geneva in 1947. GATT became one of the most effective instruments in the massive expansion of world trade in the later 20th century. By 1995, when GATT was replaced by the World Trade Organization, it was like 125 nations had signed its agreement, which covered 90% of the world trade. GATT was the most important principle was trade without the discrimination, in which members nations open their markets equally to one another. Once a country is the largest trading partners agree to reduce a tariff, that tariff cut that was automatically extended to the GATT member. GATT also established uniform custom regulation and sought to limit import quota. It has spawned many treaties that reduce tariffs, the last of which, signed in Uruguay in 1994, established by the World Trade Organization. But what was the purpose of the GATT? Well, according to the preamble of the GATT, main objective was the reduction of the barriers of the international trade. This was achieved through the reduction of the tariff barrier, quantitative restrictions, subsidies on trade through issue of agreement. Although other objectives of the contraction parties include raising a standard of living, ensuring full employment, a large of steadily growing value of real income and effective demand, developing the full use of the resource of the world, and expanding the production and exchange of goods. The first signed in 1947 was designed to provide an international forum that encouraged the free between member states by regulation and reduction of the tariff of trade goods and providing a common mechanism of resolving trade disputes. The objectives of GATT was to expand international trade by liberating trade, build an international trading system to ensure orderly and equitable expansion of world trade and contribute to the prosperity of the United States. Reduce foreign export subside, tariff and non-tariff barrier in the internal support. Cut costs by 50 to 100% on important electronic items, to strengthen the clarified rules for agriculture's production, expansion of production and international trade, and better utilization of resources of the world. What were the fundamental principles of GATT? Non-discrimination. No member country shall discriminate between members of the GATT. Exceptions are allowed. Prohibition of quantitative restrictions. The concept of the conciliation aims to avoid the damage of trading interests of contacting parties. GATT provides framework within which the negotiation can be held for reduction tariff, another barrier to trade, and structured for embodying results of such negotiation. What were the functions of the GATT? Well, most favored function status, matter related to the trade and related matters granted to any of the trading partners. Ensure that any tariff reduction or any other trade concession is extended to the GATT parties. National treatment also was another function. GATT members must be imported goods treatment equal to another domestic good. No restriction on charge like rates may apply to import goods unless equally traded. Other function of GATT, protection through tariff, prohibits quantitative restriction quotas. Contracting parties are accepted to provide protection by means of the tariff, which are transparent and subjects of the negotiation in the GATT. Dispute settlement procedures from Uruguay round negotiation provides more automatic and effective resolution of disputes between the members' action. In the GATT, there were negotiations, there were rounds. Between 1947 and the last year of the GATT, there were 8 rounds between the participation countries. The first 6 rounds were related to the curtailing tariff rate. The 7th round included the non-tariff obstacles. The 8th round was entirely different from the previous round because it was included a number of new subjects of consideration. This round was known as the Uruguay round. The discussion of this round only gave birth to the World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization. It is the deal with the global rules of trade between nations. Its main function is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly, predictable, and freely as possible. What is an organization for liberating trade and forum for governments to negotiate trade agreements and place them for them to settle trade disputes. The main question is, did GATT succeed? GATT was provisional with a limited field of action, but it succeeded over 47 years in promoting and securing the liberation of much of the world trade. It is incontestable. Continuing reduction of tariffs alone helped support very high rates on the world trade growth during the 50s and 60s, around 8% of the year on average. The momentum of the trade liberation helped ensure the trade growth constantly outpaced production growth throughout the GATT era. Of countries increasing the ability to trade each other on the reap of the benefits and trade. The rest of the new members during the Uruguay round demonstrated the multilateral trade system was recognized as the anchor of the development of an instrument economy trade reform. GATT succeeded in reducing tariffs to such a low level, combining with a series of economic reduction in the 70s and the 80s, drove government to decide other forms of protection of the sector facing increases foreign competition, high rates of unemployment, and constant factors closer led governments of the Western Europe and the North America to seek bilateral marketing arrangement with competitors and embark the subsidy rates to maintain their holds of the agriculture trade. Both these change undermined GATT's credibility and effectiveness. The problem was not to deteriorate trade policy environment. By the early of the 80s, the general agreement was clearly no longer as relevant to the release of the world trade as it been in the 40s. For a start, the world trade had become far more complex and important than 40 years before. That the globalization of the world economy was underway, trade and service, not covered by the GATT rules, was a major interest in more and more countries, and international investment has expanded. The expansion of service trade was also closely tied to the further increase in world mechanism trade. Well, to finish, in conclusion, this and other factors convince GATT members that the new effort to reinforce and extend the multilateral system should be attempted. Effort result in the Uruguay round, the Marrakech Declaration, and the creation of the GATT. Thank you.